Everyone, I'm Caitlin Brown. I'm the Communications Director at CLS. Kadeem Morris is an attorney in our housing unit. Before we start, I'm just going to make a few quick announcements to just make sure I don't forget anything. In theory, I uploaded documents to the drive that you all can have. One of them is a best practices document for setting up Zooms. I'm telling you that because it has a lot of security things to think about. It's very detailed. Lauren Parker in our housing unit was the person who compiled it. A lot of questions that you have about setting up Zooms and doing security stuff can be found in that document. So I'm just making sure that you know that there is a best practices document. We're going to try not to go over too many of the technical details because this document exists and because everyone's setup is different and there's a lot of details that maybe are a little too much for this presentation. I've also included a document on creating flyers for clients, which you can then post on your social media. This is a draft document, so nobody at CLS has seen it yet. So it's not really the final, but it is some stuff for you to think about. So I just wanted to let you know that those documents are in the handouts folder. I'm not sure how you access those, but I'm sure Kelly knows and can tell us all. Today, we are going to talk about a variety of topics. We're going to talk about social media. We're going to talk about live events using Zoom and Facebook Live. We're going to talk about virtual clinics, two different types of virtual clinics actually. And we're going to talk about town halls with legislators, and that includes telephone town halls. So we're considering that remote outreach, not necessarily digital outreach. A lot of the different topics will overlap. So you may have a question that we will end up answering at a different part of the presentation. And for that reason, we're just going to take questions at the end. That way, we can be mindful of time. So you can ask your questions in the chat, but I'm not going to be looking at the chat throughout. And I don't think Kadeem is either. We will tackle those at the end of the presentation. We will also give you all time if there are ideas that you have, things that you are doing that are really creative ways of reaching our clients right now. We'd love to hear from you. So you can absolutely chime in with those at the end. Oh, if you have questions about using social media, I'm actually presenting a planned conference on October 8th, a session on using different types of social media. So if you're not sure when to use Facebook, when to use Instagram, all of those things, I'm actually going to go into much more detail about that in another session. So I would really encourage you to also sign up for that. These sessions really do work together. And finally, my last announcement, I want to give a huge thank you to the people at LASP who actually contributed a lot of thought and insight into when we talk about virtual clinics. It's Marian Fraley, Daniel Cortez, and Christina Rizal. I may have butchered that, but the folks at LASP really did a great job helping me think through some of this stuff, so I just want to thank them. Okay, so let's start the presentation. If I can advance the slides correctly, which, we'll see. Okay, so why are we doing this? Well, because we can't do intake the way we have been. We really need to reach our clients right now. They need to know that there's a place they can turn for help. There are a lot of different rules that are changing right now, a lot of different resources because of the pandemic, a lot of legal problems caused by the pandemic. And so people actually need us now more than ever, but unfortunately, they can't just walk into our office like they're used to doing. They're not necessarily going to a community center and seeing one of our flyers. So we really have to pivot to doing outreach digitally and in a remote fashion so that we can still help our clients. We're going to talk about a couple of different types of things. One is interactive media. And so that is like when we are trying to get people to engage with us in a certain way. And that is, if we're doing like a Facebook Live event with like questions and answers, and we actually want people to tune in at a certain time and ask their questions live so we can answer them live, we're going to consider that interactive media. We also have non-interactive media, and so we're talking about flyers that we share on social media. We're talking about things that our clients can log into their social media at, on their own time, right? So we can reach people who are on different schedules. We think it's really important to do a combination of both of those things. But what we really want to focus on is that all of this stuff actually has a goal, whether it's interactive or non-interactive, there's a goal associated with it. So it might be getting them to apply for a resource, right? We might want them to learn about rental assistance so they can apply for rental assistance. It might be that we've switched how we do our intake and we want them to call our hotline or go to our website and do intake. It might be that they have a brand new legal right or a legal right they've always had that they've never needed before, and we want to get them to assert that right. So that's really what the goal of this is, right? We're not just posting things for, you know, the fun of it. We're not just posting it so that we get more likes on Facebook. What we're really trying to do is engage with our clients either live or in their own time and help them out as best we can. Okay. So like I said, we really want to focus on the goals. So everything that you do, everything that you post on social media, every video you create, every Facebook Live you do, we want to have a goal, right? So at CLS, one of our main goals has actually been to just get people to come in through intake during the pandemic, right? We had people coming to our doors, we had full waiting rooms, but then the pandemic hit and people couldn't do that anymore. And so for us, getting that hotline number out there is huge. We need to keep serving our clients. And so one of the major goals of outreach is just to continue to serve our clients as best we can. And it's also, you know, let's make sure that people know if policies are changing, how they're impacted, or if their life has changed, what they can do to get help. So, you know, one thing I want everyone to be mindful of, and again, I will go over this in much more detail in the other session I'm presenting, is that every communication you do has a goal associated with it, and you really have to sort of know what your goal is in order to decide what you're going to do. The other thing I want to highlight is that, you know, legal aid is a source for information in a time of crisis, and now is a time for us to build trust and credibility with all of our audiences. You know, they want to see that we are actually active right now, we have the answers, we are doing the work, and this is a really good chance to build credibility for the future. So these are just some of the things to keep in mind when you're doing this stuff. Okay, so the first topic we're going to talk about is social media and videos. I know most of the programs use social media. I think some are not as active as others, but I believe that everyone has at least one social media site. But for those who maybe are not posting on social media or don't use it, I want to make sure you know the reasons why we do this. And I keep getting pop-ups from when people are joining and I can't actually see the slides, but I can tell you that, you know, a lot of people are on social media, right? It's huge. Facebook is huge. All of these things are huge. And so one really good reason to use social media is that you get a big reach. You're reaching a lot of people. You know, even if someone is not on social media, there's a good chance that one of their friends or one of their family members is on social media. So there's still ways to use word of mouth when you post on social media. One thing that's great about social media is that it's basically free to use. And so any one of our programs, no matter our budget, you know, can use social media. I will be honest and say that when we pay even $100 or $200 to promote something on social media, to run an ad on Facebook, we get a huge reach, right? I mean, that's, if you put $100 or $200 to something, you might get thousands and thousands and thousands more views. So it would be disingenuous for me to tell you that it's completely free, but it is free. And when you build your network, then, you know, you get more people sharing your stuff and you get a wider reach, which is why I always recommend generally for Facebook and Twitter, posting, you know, at least once or twice a day, and for Instagram, maybe 3 times a week. Again, in my other session, I will talk about how you can do that. One great thing about social media is that people can access it in their own time. And so if somebody is, you know, a working parent and they've got kids in school, you know, they might not be logging onto Facebook until 9 o'clock at night, but our materials are there for them at 9 o'clock at night. You know, we do these Worker Wednesdays things on lunch hours, right? But the video exists on social media so other people can go and see it if they couldn't make the live event. So social media is really great. One thing I love about it is that it's pretty easy to use. A lot of people do use it personally. And so one thing we've been able to do at CLS is hand over the keys to staff members in our legal units who can help moderate comments on a Facebook Live. They can do some posting, you know, really like share the responsibilities, so this doesn't have to just fall on one person to manage. So those are some of the pros of using social media. And you know, I would really hope that everyone is using social media. Not everyone as an individual, but every organization is using social media pretty regularly, because it is a really great way of reaching our clients. Sorry guys, I'm trying. All right. Some of the cons, like I mentioned, it's free technically, but if you spend a little money, you're going to get better results. So there's a video program called Powtoon. I know some of you have used it or heard of it. It's used to make animated explainer videos, which do a really good job on social media. And it's great, but the version you want to use is $700 a year. It just, you know, to be honest, like there's no better version out there. It's an investment. We use it all the time. If you check out CLS's YouTube page, you can see what I'm talking about. It's fairly easy to use, but it does cost a little bit of money. Building your network takes effort, right? So if you have 100 Facebook followers, you're not getting a lot of likes and getting a lot of shares. The only way to get more people to like you is to post more regularly, which means in the beginning, you are basically posting into the void and hoping 1 or 2 people see it and 1 or 2 people share it, and eventually you build your network that way. You know, when I started at CLS 8 years ago, we had 500 likes on social media, and now our sites tend to have about 6,000. So it really, and that's because I post every single day. It takes a long time to grow your network, but if you keep posting, it works. And then, lastly, a con is that, truly not everyone is on social media. We know that not everyone has internet access. We know people, their phones don't always connect to the internet. Not everyone is there. But just because not everyone is there is not a reason to not use it. I would still encourage everyone to keep using social media to reach our clients. So some of the things that I would do on social media is that graphics get viewed and shared really frequently, right? If you were to post something without a picture, it's not going to get shared as much as if you post it with a picture. There's a program on the website Canva. It's free. You can create beautiful graphics and flyers. And I would really recommend using Canva. Again, I will go over that in my other session. But just think about, when can you make something pretty? I know it might seem like a little bit of a waste of time. Like, why does this flyer about rental assistance need to be pretty? Well, it's because people look at it if it's pretty and they share it if it's pretty. And that's just how social media works. So one thing I would recommend is if you are creating flyers for your clients, I would actually take the entire flyer and post it on social media, and then try to break it down into smaller graphics for Instagram. I can provide samples if you email me about what I'm talking about, or if you look at CLS's social media accounts, you'll see it. I did put in the upload documents thing, like I said, a draft about creating flyers. So you should be able to see some of the best practices that we use for creating flyers for our clients. So I would take a look at that. When you post an image or a flyer on social media, it's really helpful if you link to a PDF, or even better, a web page that just has the text. And the reason why you want to do that is because it helps with people who are visually impaired, helps with screen readers. There are a lot of reasons why it's really good to post a graphic and then link to something with the text on it that people can read another way. Hopefully your organization has a media or social media policy and you are following it. I could talk about that for hours. You can email me or call me and I will talk your ear off about that. But I think the most important thing to know is you don't put anything on social media that you wouldn't want on the front page of the New York Times. And you don't put anything on social media that could harm your clients or harm your organization. So, just follow, it's common sense for the most part, but you should have some kind of media policy or social media policy. And I'm very happy to provide samples of those. And lastly, people ask me this all the time, so I just wanted to put out there, just keep everything on one organizational account. So if you have a special project, like generally, I would not have a different social media account for that project. And that is really because it just takes forever to get followers anyway, right? And it's just too many things to manage. And, maybe people you have, we've got CLS's page, right? And we do a lot of stuff for tenants. Well, we post our tenant stuff on our CLS page, not on a page for tenants only. And that is because you just never know who, like, maybe I'm a homeowner, but my friend is a renter. And so I'm not going to look at a page for renters, but if it's on CLS's page, I'll pass it on to my friend who's a renter. So it's just, you know, I know people always like to create different social media accounts for different projects or different events. I wouldn't recommend that. I would recommend keeping it all on one account. So that's sort of the basics of social media. I think I'm turning it over to Kadeem. Yes, I am. All right, and I'm gonna turn it over to Kadeem to talk to you. Kadeem, just let me know when you want me to advance the slides.
Thanks, Caitlin. So good afternoon, everyone. As Caitlin mentioned, I'm a staff attorney here at CLS in the housing unit, and I'm gonna have this like really, hopefully not too overwhelming conversation about Zoom and Facebook Live. They're what we consider interactive forms of social media where you post content with the hope that someone will engage with that content in a specific time frame, and you can kind of track what someone's doing. So let's say, for instance, at CLS, we had this web series called Tenant Tuesdays at 2. It was every Tuesday at 2 p.m. We invited people to pre-register through Zoom, and I'm sure hopefully everyone on this call in some way, shape, or form is familiar with Zoom because it's now what schools are using, it's what's planned, has been using for their webinars for quite some time virtually. So it's Zoom, you log in, you sit, you learn. It's passive engagement, but it also allows individuals to ask questions, take polls, and all of that. We're going to talk about those features a little more. So I guess the top questions are why Zoom or why Facebook Live? It's a form of media that is really easy for you to control in terms of you, the individual, sharing information. Most people are on Facebook. Now, the younger generations have started to fall off in terms of interactions with Facebook as a social media platform, but most people in the, let's say, 35 to 60 or 70 age group are either on Facebook or have someone in their family who sits on Facebook on a regular basis. Like you can think about that aunt or uncle who comments on everything that you post on Facebook. They're the type of person who will also like your organization's page, especially if they're a community member and if they've had any sort of interaction with your organization previously. The benefits of this demographic and like this form of outreach is that you can give clients the most up-to-date information in a really accessible way. You don't need to call every individual client and say, hey, this rule has changed, you now have this benefit. You can put, as Caitlin was talking about, a flyer on Facebook and have a Facebook Live conversation about it, and then give the individual the opportunity to link to something else at a later date. And what's really good about Zoom and Facebook Live as interactive formats is that you have so many options. You can do language interpretation in multiple languages at the same time. When we had our Tenant Tuesdays, we usually had simultaneous interpretation in Spanish. There was no delay. Someone would sign on to Zoom. There'd be a globe at the bottom of the screen, kind of right next to the reactions. And you would click on that, choose your preferred language that we are providing interpretation services in, and they would listen to the entire presentation in their native tongue, whether that be Spanish or some other language. We only did Spanish because you have to have someone live interpreting at the same time as you present, but that was an option. And we also could have someone assigned to type closed captions. So for someone who was visually impaired but could listen or read to an entire presentation, they would be able to follow along on their screen as the words popped up at the bottom of the screen. And Zoom is really the most ADA accessible format. It gives you several options in which you can provide information and allow either LEPs or people with disabilities or the inability to listen, to read, and participate as you present information. It also Zoom allows you to simultaneously reach another platform. So when we had our Tenant Tuesdays, we were presenting much like we are doing right now through Zoom. But at the same time, we were also on Facebook Live. Now, why would we do both at the same time? It's a bit difficult to manage, but the benefit is that Zoom You have a webinar set up, you have a registration component. So you're dependent on people in your network to come in advance and to select that they want to engage with whatever material you are presented. They might have seen a flyer, signed up for registration, and they're here to listen, kind of much in the same way you guys are to what we have to say about digital communication. With Facebook Live, everyone who follows you gets a notification that you are going live and having a conversation about whatever the topic is. So that pops up, and it gives you an opportunity to reach a different set of audience members who wouldn't typically have been on your website or seen a promotional flyer, or they scrolled past it, didn't really think about it, but at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, they saw a notification and they say, hey, I want more information about that topic. Let me listen in. And through Facebook Live and also Zoom, you can have, as Caitlin mentioned, a moderator, someone there to respond to comments as they are posted, redirect someone to your live website. Also, you have people listening to an interpreted session on Zoom, also people listening in English on Facebook Live, and they can share with their networks and vastly expand the ability of the people you can reach. And most importantly, both on Zoom and on Facebook, you can record the presentation and then post it to a different form of media. So when you think about you've gone on Facebook Live and you've been live for an hour, that automatically saves to your Facebook page. You can then download that and post it to YouTube or post it to your website as content that someone can thereafter go and engage with. Next slide. So in terms of the cons, particularly with Zoom, it draws people who are already within your network. That's why it's great, if possible, to link to a Facebook Live presentation where not only can you reach the people who like your page, but you reach their connected people as they share your content. And most importantly, clients are least likely to sign up for something like a webinar. Webinar is really good for network or training advocates who you can passively share information with. They're already in your circle and you don't have to worry about ethical considerations as you deal with clients as they interact with social media. You're basically disseminating information that advocates can use and disseminate further. And if you want to have that conversation, you can go to Facebook Live and simultaneously have that conversation that clients can engage with. And then you have a moderator who redirects clients to your live website or whatever other form of interaction there is. Now, there's the risk of getting Zoom bombed. As someone who has been Zoom bombed, I think that's why we created that best practices manual that really tells you how to navigate the security issues that exist around Zoom. What you never want to do is just post a link and a password directly onto a form of social media, because someone can find that and easily come into your meeting and be in your meeting and back and control that meeting without you knowing about it. So to the extent that you have the ability to get a licensed account on Zoom, you can set up webinars, password protect those webinars, limit the individuals who can do things like share screens and share audio. That way you can maintain control of that platform. And it also allows you to, as I mentioned, link to YouTube, link to Facebook, and simultaneously present. And I know Plan has done that also previously when they had their MLK reception. It was done over Zoom, but linked onto YouTube. So there are various ways to do that. Why Zoom over Facebook for this type of presentation? If you've ever seen a Facebook Live, you have maybe one or two people max on your screen when they are talking. Zoom, what Zoom does is the presenters show up individually as they present. And on Facebook, if you look at that, you'll just see the presenter's face and the PowerPoint. If you're focusing on a PowerPoint, you won't see 60 or 70 people on your screen because they don't have the capacity to simultaneously do that in the way that Zoom does. Live events, they need flexibility and responsiveness. So you need to have you can't just go live on Facebook and have a conversation with you and someone else and not have someone monitoring the Facebook feed where you're having this conversation, because Needless to say, there will be someone who comes on and either has something to say about your organization or has something to say about the particular topic that you are talking about. And that's a great opportunity to offer resources or just connect them with a link to your organization. And that positive interaction, especially if someone else follows up later on, will lead that person to come back more often and interact with your media and also share your social media content. In terms of like when we do a video and put it out to Facebook Live, it can get anywhere from 500 to 1,500 likes, depending on the subject matter, and it gets reshared by people who like our page, and also organizations that we cooperate with also reshare our videos. So we use our network to reach their network and vice versa, and that really can expand the reach of the media platform. So it's really important to have someone standing by all the time whenever you're live to monitor what's going on your page, and also just to like weed out people who may have negative comments who you can either block, moderate, just so that the flow of information does not get obstructed. Next slide. So we kind of talked about this somewhat. Follow the security protocols document. Caitlin is going to be doing another presentation later in October that really talks you through all of the social media platforms and which one is best to use for the type of outreach that you are using. If you were using Zoom, much like you did for this presentation, create a registration link so that someone has to go through at least one step of security before they come in, so that you don't end up with a room of 1,500 strangers and you're like, great, 1,500 people, but those 1,500 people are there for a nefarious purpose and not actually to get the information that you want to provide. And also, it's your organization's image that is going out into the world. So you have to do, while you want to interact with social media in a really positive way and be accessible, you have to do it in a way that makes sure that nothing tarnishes the reputation of your organization, even if it's not you directly. But if you're known for getting Zoom bombed, then people are less likely to interact with you in that way because of the fear of being a part of that. We talked about assigning an administrator to monitor the chat rooms, either on Zoom, Facebook Live, or YouTube. Also, if at all possible, be sure to provide interpretation services either through Zoom, if you can do simultaneous interpretation, or if you can record a video and then have it translated and posted later into another form, another language. That's also a great way to do it. You don't necessarily have to go externally to hire someone to be an interpreter. You can use your bilingual staff or someone else to interpret for you on the platform. Just go through a practice run so that people are familiar with how it works. And of course, have a place either on your website or directly on a YouTube page where your videos are stored. Because if you create a catalog of videos or live conversations and you then post them somewhere, when someone in your geographic region Googles, let's say, evictions, it will point them to that video. And the more videos you post, the higher up in the search results you become. So if you continually interact with social media in that way, your organization becomes one of the first two pop-ups, and the content that you shared, hopefully great and amazing content for all the work that your programs are doing, will be there for someone to interact with and then can create a different opportunity or channel of outreach for you. Next slide. So I'm going to turn it back over to Caitlin to have a conversation about virtual clinics.
Hi, everyone. So when we talk about virtual clinics, I'm actually going to talk about a couple of different things. What CLS has been doing is, we are not set up to do online intake, and I know many of you also do not do online intake. And so what we've been doing is for, certain topics, like we, would always do criminal record expungement clinics in the community, as many of you do. We've been doing virtual expungement clinics where we basically have a pre-screened form and we advertise it on social media, and people can, enter their information in the form and get a call back. And so that's sort of, because not everyone wants to just call a number, and it actually, can reach people a different way. That's how we do it. I do know that LASP and maybe others are actually doing, virtual clinics where they do a Zoom presentation and then they use breakout rooms to talk to clients individually. And so there's, there's a few different ways you can do it. But basically what we're trying to talk about here is just replicating a way to serve clients beyond just having a hotline phone number and having clients leave a message or having something staffed live. We are talking about, two almost opposite things. One where people can fill out a form and you can call them back when you're able to, and one where there's a live event. And so there is a certain time that people have to come to you to get help. But there are pros and cons to sort of both of those. So just the pro to doing virtual clinics in general is that, like I said, it replicates one way that we served clients before the pandemic. So, I think that the goal in general is to keep replicating our continued work as much as we can. And so this is one way of doing that. One great thing about this is that there are grants out there that will cover the cost of promotion for these or other costs. So like, for instance, if we're talking about, clean slate, and we're talking about a clean slate record sealing clinic where people can, get their records looked up and get talked to the program and figure out what their options are. We actually have money in the budget for doing, clean slate expungement clinics, and we can use that money, with permission from the funders, use that money to maybe, kick $200 into a Facebook ad, and that'll promote the link to the form to a whole bunch of people. And that's a really good way for us to get people to come to us, especially people who are not necessarily in our network. And so, check with your funders, check with your grants, but when you do these virtual clinics, it may be possible that some of it is actually covered, some of your funding. One thing about these that is really great is that for people who cannot, they can't necessarily walk into your office, right? Because they, even if your office was open, because they, maybe they work all day long, right? Or they've got young kids or something like that. And they can't come to in-person clinics and events. Well, this is actually a great way to reach them, right? Because they can do it from their home. So those intake forms, are a great way to do it from their home. I would say that, if you have a virtual clinic where there's a presentation and then there's Zoom, be mindful of what times of day you do them, try to vary it up. But, if you can do that, this is really good for people who traditionally struggle to get help from us. One of the cons, if you're gonna have a live event or a form, well, people need to know about it, right? And so, people on your social media, if you post about it, they're gonna know it, but they already know you, they already know how to get help. So I think one of the issues is that, it's still hard to reach people. That's why, one thing I would recommend, and I think I have this on the best practice slide, is that if you can work with partners to do this, they can promote it too, and that'll reach people who are not necessarily in your network. But you do have to do a little extra work. But, I don't think it's any more work than you had to do before the pandemic to get people to come into intake, right? We still have a responsibility to get people to know who we are and what we do. And this is just sort of a different way of having to do that. Facebook has introduced a lot of new rules about targeting people. These rules do not solve any of the major problems with Facebook, but they do make it really hard to advertise things. So as an example, we right now are running an advertisement, just a couple $100 with a form for people who are home health aides and CNAs who have not been paid appropriately. And so we are trying to get them to fill out a form so we can, contact them and see if we can represent them. Unfortunately, Facebook thinks that it's an employment opportunity. It's employment related, of course, but it's not an employment opportunity. But because Facebook thinks it's a job posting, no matter how we, rephrase the ads, it actually won't let us promote it to certain people. And so it's really, Facebook has made it a lot more difficult to promote these things. But I would say that, the biggest thing that, I've heard, and this is one that, people at last mentioned, and I think they're absolutely right, is that it's really difficult to sort of read the room and connect with people. Like right now, I actually can't see any of you. So I have no idea if you guys are playing on your phones or not. I don't know what's happening. Hopefully you're not. But it's hard to read the room and make that connection with people. You're missing that face-to-face connection. And so it's not going to replace people coming into intake and sitting across the table from you and talking to you. It's not going to replace, doing a live presentation with people at, a clinic. But what it is going to do is it's going to help you continue to serve clients. So the first bullet point, I'm going to explain this one because I couldn't figure out how to word it. Basically, like, you would probably not have an elected official sort of sponsor your intake generally, but you might be able to get an elected official or community group or someone like that to sponsor a virtual expungement clinic. And the big difference there is that you can then, you know, use their network. So if you get everyone who's a partner to share it on their social media, you're going to reach people that you wouldn't have reached before. So sometimes I think having like a really focused one is probably a really good way to reach people. I think people are also more responsive if it's like a certain topic, right? If you have, you know, I keep using rental assistance, but if you have a rental assistance clinic where you give a presentation and then you do intake just based on, you know, rental assistance or even a more broad topic, I think people are more likely to respond to it, and you're more likely to be able to have partners who want to sign on to it, and those partners can share it on their social media or with their networks. One thing I would say, especially if you're using a form, is be really clear about what the response time is. So that home health aides form that I mentioned, you know, we say on the form, please allow us a week or two to contact you. You know, we really try to manage expectations. So I think if you're using a form, you know, it's really good to be clear, like, it will take a little while for us to get back to you. We will contact you in a week or two. So that they're not wondering if their submission went through, especially because we actually use Google Forms for a lot of this stuff because it's free and easy to use. But you can't do a bounce back email, to my knowledge. So we have, like, in the form, it literally, you know, says, like, please allow a week or two before they can fill it out. So it's really good to manage expectations. When you are creating a form, to the extent that you can use standardized fields, by which I mean, like, I wouldn't just have birth date on a form. It would, if you can do a form where it, like, is a field type, and so they're required to put in, you know, 2 digits, 2 digits, 2 digits, 2 digits, 4 digits, or something like that. Or, you know, if you're collecting an email address, I would say that, you know, make sure that the form knows that you're getting an email address, because it'll require them to have it in a certain format. And that, you know, reduces the risk of errors. So, you know, I've seen forms where people don't standardize their fields, and then they collect information that's not as good. You know, the client makes a mistake when they're typing something in, and it just makes it really hard. So it's a little wonky, but to the extent that you can, like, sort of use the form to say what field you're trying to get, rather than use free text, like, that's going to make a big difference. For live events, so last, you know, was talking to me about this. If you are using Zoom breakout rooms, so you do a presentation on Zoom, and then you put people in breakout rooms to, like, talk to them one-on-one, which is a really, like, awesome way of doing this. And I think it's really smart that they're doing it this way. If you're using 2 computers for some reason, you know, you've got one client on one computer and one client on the other computer, just be really careful that the noise doesn't carry over to a breakout room. So if that means that you need to put, you know, use 2 computers in separate rooms, or something like that, like, that's what you have to do. It's just really important that you are, you know, being mindful in these breakout rooms that, like, clients can't hear each other and they can't hear you talking to a different client. As I mentioned, like, inquire about funding from your funders. So see if you can, like, promote things. So one thing we've done, it's a little different, is, you know, for Clean Slate, we actually we have a fair amount of money to run ads about Clean Slate. And one thing that we've done is we target people who are unemployed somehow or looking for jobs. And I will confess that we've gotten help from marketers for this, so I'm not, you know, necessarily expert in all of this. But, you know, if you can target people by certain characteristics to the extent that Facebook will let you, you'll be more likely to get people. So we've run ads for, you know, restaurant workers. You know, we've got a clinic for restaurant workers. I will actually use Facebook ads to, like, target people who are listed as restaurant workers in their bios. So we're not wasting money on, you know, targeting the wrong people. So that's just something to keep in mind, that, you know, you can, if you have grant funding, this can be a really good way to reach people who you're actually targeting. All right, and back over to Kadeem to talk about telephone town halls and things with elected officials.
If I could just interrupt here, this is Kelly. I'm launching the first of the CLE poll boxes. This will be up for 2 minutes. So for the attorneys on the webinar, please respond. And thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. So I want to talk a little bit about town halls with elected officials. Now, I know that the word or term elected officials can scare some of us as attorneys in terms of like not wanting to be in a conversation about maybe sponsoring a bill or legislation. This is something totally separate. This is an elected official generally or hopefully in service to their constituency, tries much in the same way that we do to engage and get as much information out about, let's say, the pandemic, because we're currently all living through the COVID-19 pandemic. And what hopefully most of us have noticed is that our elected officials are in some way trying to engage and provide as much up-to-date information from the government and other private sources of information, whether they be hospital workers, medical doctors, legal aid providers, so that vulnerable populations are aware of what's happening throughout the pandemic. So elected official town halls are a really great way to do that. And most of them have been telephonic so far, and the reach is exponential. Like you're talking about 1,500 to 2,000 constituents who will call in and listen to their elected official and whoever their panelists are as they present information about the pandemic, about unemployment benefits. And this is really a great way for your organization to, let's say, double its network in terms of the number of people that you can reach, because you've got their network and you've got your network being the people who already engage with you in social media, or probably come into your door or referring people to you to get services. Their network are traditionally people who depend on their elected officials for the most up-to-date information, who even if they have a legal problem, will still call their elected official's office and say, for example, my landlord isn't making repairs to my home. How do I get that addressed? That is their initial point of contact as they seek out help. So it really helps to expand your platform, your network, your sphere of influence. And these are great relationships to actually build. Because if you build a relationship with an elected official through one telephone webinar, that will possibly lead to another, or you being referred as the staffers all talk to each other to someone else who might have a similar constituency in your network, and they will then reach out to you and say, can you come on and present on this topic because it's an issue that's affecting my constituents? Like, how do they get rental assistance that is being provided by the state through COVID? Who should they talk to? What considerations should they be aware of? And that really helps to strengthen the reputation of your organization in the community through networks that you typically would not necessarily have access to. So it's really great for new client outreach and also building the reputation of your organization. One good thing about the audience who tend to call in to elected officials and their webinars or telephone town halls, these are people who are generally eligible for our services, whether on the basis of specific demographic issues like being seniors, being single moms, people who are at home and more likely to engage with the initial robocall that came to inform them about this telephone webinar, or people who would see a flyer or posting from their political official and mark down the date and also plan and will attend and will ask questions. So most importantly, this is an opportunity to create a consistent referral network through your elected officials. As you can imagine, your elected officials get a lot of mail, a lot of questions about certain issues, and to the extent that they can refer it to your organization, that positions your organization in their mind as a good source of information, and they share it with their communities, share it with other philanthropic networks that they might be a part of. And that really builds both your social media platform, because you are going out in a different way of digital communication with clients, and expands your ability to reach out to clients you typically wouldn't see. So it's generally really good to the extent that you are able to have someone on standby to field these calls and take these requests and find someone to do it. It's generally good. I just want to point out, I think throughout everything that both me and Caitlin have been saying, it's kind of come across, social media is an entire job in and of itself. and consistently interacting with social media is a lot of work. Even if you're just putting on a web series for a limited amount of time, you still have to make sure that you're consistently going on at the same time, providing consistent information that people who you bring on are knowledgeable and respected in their fields. And you kind of have to take the temperature of what someone's going to say and know whether or not they're the right person. So it's a lot of work that goes into this. This shouldn't just be something you do as an aside. It should be something that you're prepared to commit to. Maybe you don't have a full staff person, but have someone who like 50% of their time is just doing this. Because if you think of all of the forms of social media that you are interacting with, in the height of the pandemic, we were getting requests on every single one of these platforms on a daily basis and having to manage and juggle that. So you don't want to halfway do something or not respond to an opportunity that would have been really good for your organization. Next slide. Sorry. So the cons. Now, there are a few cons to being on a town hall with elected officials. Generally speaking, you are a part of a larger audience. In reference to the pandemic, there'll be medical doctors. If you're with a state rep, they might have their local council reps and other people who are on. So an hour might be, your elected official probably takes 20 minutes off of the top of that hour just to give the information that they have, and then other individuals will provide and share information. And you might just end up with 5 or 10 minutes to really 10 minutes if you're lucky, to introduce your organization, the services you can provide, and a way that people may be able to contact you. So the goal, unless someone has a really specific question that you can answer, is to provide a way for someone else to interact with you. And it's basically dependent on the trust that they have in their elected official to translate to trust in your organization, and then you following up, which will solidify that relationship with that client or potential person. And the relationship that you have with the elected official will determine kind of the pecking order where you stand. Like if this is something that you do on a consistent basis, they'll be more likely to put you closer to the top of the order or give you more time to actually share about your organization, or even in their intro, they will know more about your organization and be able to share more directly with their constituents what your organization does and how they can reach you. And I think what's really super important when you do these town halls is always follow up or circle back with the elected official staff member. Like if you only got 5 minutes to speak and you have things like flyers or other information that they can hand out to their constituents or post, make sure you send a follow-up email and share that with the elected official staffer so that they can also share it with their constituency. Next slide. So best practices: reach out proactively and offer to present on specific topics. Housing is a large issue right now. Unemployment compensation is a large issue right now. Utilities is also a large issue right now, to the extent that you have a pre-existing relationship with an elected official in your area, whether they're a board member or just a family member of someone else. Reach out, offer the services of your organization to the extent that your capacity as an organization allows you to meaningfully follow up with referrals that come through this channel. Reach out, offer to present, stand as a resource. Even if you can't present, send materials that you might have, like a flyer is always good to share. If you've got a booklet or resource guide prepared, send that to them so that they can share with their organization. If you have a hotline number or a means of doing online intake, make sure that they're aware of that so that they can always share that. If your elected official reaches out to you, it's important to respond as soon as possible, because either way it will get lost in their email or they won't take you seriously the next time around if you do get in on that time. And make sure that you participate in such a way that it encourages either the other presenters or the elected officials to widely disseminate your information. Be prepared, sometimes over-prepared. Be on the call early. If it's usually they let you in about 10 minutes before so that you can introduce yourself, introduce your organization, talk a little bit more about what you do so that it's fresh in the minds of everyone else who's on the call with you. And as we said, thank you. Emails are very important as a means of follow-up so that you're in their database, you're in their Rolodex, and they can think about you going forward. And most importantly, when you're on the calls, it's okay to say you don't know the answer to a question, but you will follow up directly with whoever it is. What usually happens if there are 1,500 people on and they get to, let's say, 20 questions, they will then give the participants an opportunity to talk to their staffers and leave their numbers so that they can follow up. And sometimes they will refer those calls just directly to you based on the information that you provided and the knowledge and expertise that you provided. So that's kind of a really quick way of how to interact with that form of media. It doesn't take a lot of work. It just takes really positioning yourself in that relationship so that you get called on consistently to provide that sort of information. Next slide. So here's where we kind of shift our conversation into the ethical considerations of interacting with clients or potential clients on social media. These are the rules that, through like a cursory view of like professional responsibility, really came to mind, to me at least. If you have additional rules, we'll open up in a few minutes for a more interactive conversation so that people can raise any concerns or questions that they have. But the duty, we'll start with, can a client really perceive that there's an attorney-client relationship being formed via social media? That's always a really tricky question, because if someone asks you a very specific question about their situation and you answer it as it relates to their situation, you may be in the situation where you were given specific legal advice and they're assuming, whether or not rightfully so, that you are somehow representing them in that manner. So it's always important to like think at a baseline, give information and not legal advice, and make sure that whoever is monitoring your social media, if it's not an attorney, which it generally isn't an attorney, that they're just given information that's already been prepackaged, like you can share a flyer with someone, redirect them to a resource, and not actually trying to answer the question based on an individual's facts and circumstances. If you're on Zoom or on a Facebook Live, use hypotheticals. Don't say, well, John, in your situation, this is what would happen, because then you're given specific legal advice as it relates to that individual's facts and circumstances, and they can assume, whether or not rightfully so, that you're representing them, or that they've formed this sort of relationship where they can say, Kadeem at Community Legal Services told me that these are what my rights are in this situation as it relates to you, landlord. And you don't want that to happen over social media. You want them to reach out to you after the fact, and then you can screen them for eligibility and then determine whether or not you can offer them legal services, or if this is a matter that you are covering. And also on social media, people may hop on to your live Zoom conversation and ask questions that are really not about the topic that you cover. Like, I know nothing about unemployment. So in the midst of a webinar or a Facebook Live, I should not be answering any questions about unemployment, because then I would not be competently responding to the question or even providing the right information. So just considering the kind of requirements that we as attorneys are required to live by. If you don't know the area of law, don't speak to the area of law. If this is, don't do anything that will allow a client or prospective client to perceive that you are representing them over social media. Also, expectation setting is very important. If you refer someone to your website or to your office, make sure, as Caitlin mentioned, you set up a time frame and when a response will happen. If someone calls you and say, I have to go to court tomorrow, and you're referring them to your hotline, make sure you put, it may take 24 to 48 hours for someone to respond to you, and we're not guaranteeing you that we will help you, because people generally assume that when they reach out to us as organizations and they speak to someone, albeit virtually, that we are helping them. You will never, I'm sure you all know the number of people who you have one conversation with and they show up and they're like, this person from this agency is my attorney. whether or not you've gotten to that point in the conversation. And most importantly, over social media is a duty of confidentiality, whether or not this person is your client. You don't want someone to say something on a social media platform that will either completely disclose who they are or details about their case that could color them in a negative light to the opposing party or compromise your ability to represent them or not represent them. You want to make sure that confidential client information is kept off of social media, or confidential pre-client information is also kept off of social media, so that there's no way for someone to go and search and find out this information, or someone's not giving you like the social security numbers for their kids or anything like that on social media, because people tend to share everything once they have a point of contact with you, and you don't want that point of contact to negatively impact your ability to represent their case, or just share information that can be hackable, because when you as an organization take on a social media platform, you're responsible to keep whatever content is provided there safe, and also to make sure that as clients or prospective clients engage with you, none of the information that they provide with you is compromised. Now, we can talk back end as to whether or not we own that information in the context of Facebook and other things, but that's another reason why we really shouldn't have people providing detailed information like addresses and other things over social media to us as an organization, so that there's not an assumed responsibility or ethical obligation on our part to keep that information safe. So I'm gonna turn it back over to Caitlin to kind of moderate any questions that may be coming through the chat. And if you want to have a further discussion or information sharing about ethical considerations, that would be a really great time to do that. We want to hear what other people across the state are doing in terms of social media and managing client expectations.
So I think Kelly is going to help moderate the questions. So what we'd like to do now is do two things. If you have things that your organization is doing that you want to share with us, you're doing some client outreach digitally or remotely that we haven't mentioned, then definitely feel free to share it. I think what we're going to do, because we've got such a big group, is ask that you post in the chat that you have something to say. Or that, okay, great. I think we're gonna post in the chat if you have something to, Turner, please don't dance while I'm doing a presentation. Can you please finish your work at your granola bars? Okay, thank you. Okay, thanks. I mean, we didn't get through either the practice sessions that we did without, this, so I'm not sure why I thought we would get through this. So I would say drop some information in the chat if you have anything that you are doing that you'd love to share with us, so we can all learn from your ideas. I know a couple people have already asked questions, so I think that Kelly is going to help moderate those. So yeah, Joe, type something in the chat if you've got a question or a comment, and Kelly will call on someone, and I think we can unmute you then.
Okay. Do you want me to go ahead and just read the question that was already typed in?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. This is from Marion Frawley. Curious what dollar amount you recommend as a minimum Facebook ad buy. It sounds like you often use $100 to $200 as a baseline. On the flip side, what is the largest Facebook ad buy you've done, and how did you determine its success?
Great question. Yeah, I tend to use anywhere from 100 to 250. And a lot of it honestly is based on like, what does the grant cover? If we have a grant where they're like, if it's, statewide, and you can reach, hundreds of thousands of people, it'll be more. If you're really doing like a, quick, like, okay, we're doing this event tomorrow and we really didn't think about this in advance, like we'll just throw $100 at it and hope that something sticks. For Clean Slate, that's kind of an anomaly because we have had money through a few foundations where we can spend like thousands of dollars a month and use professional marketers. For me personally, ads that I've set up, I would say really 250 is probably the max. We had a video about pandemic unemployment compensation that we put up, and I attempted to spend $500, and Facebook ran it for a couple of days and then decided that it was targeting people, even though it wasn't. But in those couple of days, it was spent about $100, I think, and we got thousands and thousands of video views. So I would say really like 100 to 250 per ad is pretty standard for us, and that tends to be effective. I wouldn't spend too much money unless like a grant is basically like, hey, we're going to throw you thousands of dollars and we just want you to do ads. Like that's a different story. But generally, I don't want to spend too much money on this stuff. Like I think, average 200.
Okay, and anybody else with questions or comments, please go ahead and type them in the chat box right now. I also think while we're waiting for questions to come in, I'm going to go ahead and launch the second CLE credit poll. You should see the question on your screen right now, so please go ahead and respond to that for attorneys seeking CLE credit. And I'm not seeing any questions or comments coming in.
If you don't want to type a full question or type a full comment in, feel free to just type in like, please unmute me, and we will figure out if we can do that. Because I know some of you probably don't want to type like a whole long thing in there. That's fine. Just say that you have something you want to say.
I'm actually curious if any of the organizations represented on the call today are using any platforms that we didn't talk about, and what their experiences have been, or are like engaging in outreach in a different way from what we've spoken about.
Yeah, I'd love to know that.
And again, if it's too much to type, if you just, I don't know, send any kind of chat, your name will appear, and then I can go through and unmute you. Now we apparently have a very quiet audience.
Yeah, I thought we would actually, like, we saved a lot of time for questions because I thought there'd be a lot of that. Okay. Jolene has a good question. I'm wondering if actually anyone from LASP can jump in on that question. So Jolene asked if anyone that has done the Zoom breakout rooms for a clinic, how many people did you get? How did you advertise? Yeah, is anyone from LASP on here who's done that, who wants to jump in, or any other organization? I just know that LASP has done these, and I would love to hear from them.
Any LASP people, if you can send a chat that says anything so I get your name, I can unmute you.
I don't know if Marian is still on. Oh, Marian's here. Okay, great.
Okay.
Can we unmute Marian, because she would at least be able to, she knows this stuff. She knows her stuff.
Just give me a moment to find her in this list of over 100 people. Here we go. Marian, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. You should. There we go.
So I'm unmuted now, I guess. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes.
So I'm not the person who runs our outreaches. So we have, but my understanding is it's a wide range of numbers, and we always partner with other organizations. So a lot of our Zoom meetings are with, say, PA Career Link of Chester County and United Way of Chester County. Phoenixville Library has been a big partner during the pandemic. And so, for instance, and they handle the promotion. And so it's really varied a lot, and I would have to research it to get back to you for a better, better number, which I can do, and maybe get back to you in your social media thing. But we do, we publicize them on our website. We have an events page, and we also publicize them on social media. Pretty much during the pandemic, I did add Instagram, and I added, well, YouTube, but that's just a small thing at this point. So it really varies, but our partner orgs help us advertise, and it really extends our reach. I mean, we've had, pretty full ones, up to 100, I think, and others that have been way smaller, but some are kind of geared towards smaller. For instance, the clinics with community, the Chester County, there's a women's group, I'm trying to think. what the name of it is. Anyway, so it's arranged, and sometimes when we gave in-person clinics, you know, it would be 10 or 18 people might be a good number for those. And so because our attorneys are talking individually to people, a small group is not necessarily a bad thing, but some of them have been popular. I think some of the eviction ones have been popular, but I'll get back to you on that in October at your October 8th session.
So much, Marion. I really appreciate that. Kelly, I can actually look at these questions if you want, because I want to answer a couple of them really quickly, if that's okay.
Sure.
Nate, I have no analytics on anything, because you know me and you know I didn't bother looking that stuff up. I can find out how many people are using a mobile device or a computer, but I do not actually have that information off the top of my head. I don't know if Kadeem, for any reason why you would know that.
So I don't know because I haven't ran the analytics on it, but I do know that at least for our Zoom through Facebook Live presentations, it is much easier to get on a Facebook Live on your phone. And Facebook has a low data mode that makes it easy for you to like not eat through your entire data plan to watch a presentation, versus Zoom takes a little bit more of like hardware and processor space. So it's easier for someone to go and like watch this Zoom presentation on Facebook Live because it's designed for their screen in that way than it would be for them to download Zoom onto their phone and then use that platform to interact through the Zoom app.
I'm not answering these in order. I'm just answering them in the order that I have an answer for them. So Dave Jonas asks about overcoming limited access to online platforms in a clinic setting. Yeah, so the two things I would say about that are that pretty much anytime we are advertising one of our like virtual clinics, we are also advertising our intake hotline number. And we're just really giving out our intake number as much as we can. So I mean, it really, like at this point, if someone doesn't have a phone or doesn't have internet access, I think, you know, and I mean, either they're going to like a community group setting or something like that, or we're not reaching them yet. And I do think that that is a real problem that we need to contend with during the pandemic. Kadeem mentioned this, but I think, you know, one point that I want to bring up is, again, when we're doing these town halls with elected officials, they are telephone call-ins. And so the elected official will do a robocall to their whole district. You may have even gotten one of these robocalls. They will do a robocall to their whole district that says, call this number at this time. And a lot of people who don't have internet access do call in. We've noticed a lot of seniors are there, a lot of people who maybe are not online. And what's great is that those people, and now I'm going to answer a different question, that's why I'm trying to do this all together. A lot of those people will then call their elected official after the town hall with their specific questions, and then the official's staff members know to refer them to us. And so these telephone town halls are a really great way of converting participants to clients. And again, like we just really promote our intake phone number, our intake process, everything we do. It is all over our social media if you take a look at it. And really what we're doing is we're basically providing a limited amount of information to establish our credibility, to let people know they have rights and that they should learn more about their rights, and to get them informed that we have an intake process that they can participate in. So I was trying to answer Dave Jonas's question and Sarah Andrews' question at the same time. And if I didn't, let me know. And then to answer Dana.
So, Caitlin, can I just add briefly to Sarah's question? So in terms of real-time conversion, like if we're having like a Zoom or Facebook Live presentation on a specific topic and someone is responding to us on Facebook Live saying, I've been trying to, let's say, reach out to this agency, we will probably ask that person to call our hotline directly, or if they've called us previously and we're kind of playing phone tag in the remote world that we're in right now, we will ask maybe one of our paralegals or someone who's on intake to follow up with that person on the same day, so that there's that not real time, but as real as possible time response, because someone who's trying to reach you hasn't been able to reach you and you're playing phone tag, but you know they're accessible at this very time and want to follow up. So that's kind of how we try to do that. It doesn't work in every situation because intake volume can be heavier than normal at times, but we try as much as possible to capture everyone through all our media platforms.
Great, thank you so much. All right, to answer Dana Crawford's question about why I recommend the $700 version of Powtoon, there are a few reasons, but I think the biggest reason is that you can only publish a certain number of videos on a monthly basis if you don't pay that money. And when we are creating a video, we have our communications associate and our AmeriCorps Vista communications associate. They are the ones that are actually putting the video in Powtoon. You know, they're creating the script. They're going back and forth with our advocates about it. And every time they want an advocate to take a look at a video, they have to hit the publish button. And so if you can only hit the publish button 5 times with the free version, then you can't go back and forth and let the advocate review it before it's final. So it's a like stupid logistical thing, but it's basically so we have a chance to like have people, you know, view the video and give their feedback and make edits and go back and forth and make those tiny changes and not have to have everything be perfect right away. So even if you were creating, you know, 1 video a month, you'd probably still publish, like you probably hit that publish button, you know, more than 5 times. So it's really just so that we have chances to edit stuff. And also we've done some videos where it's statewide information. And I know in a couple of cases, we've actually, other programs in the Plan Network have asked us if they can have their logo and their intake information on one of our videos. Absolutely, but it does mean that we have to publish something again. So it's really just, it's a sort of a technical, dumb little thing, but that's why we spend the $700. Okay. So I guess for Dave's question, he asked about, you know, suggestions where there's a mix of participants who do not use video features. I actually think the Zoom presentations are a really great way to do that because some people can use video and some people can call in. And so that's really like, to my knowledge, that's one of the best ways to do this is because as long as people know about it who are phone only, they can call in so they don't need to use video. But people who want to view a video can. It's great because, you know, people can just listen, and if people have literacy issues, whether or not they're using video, they can, like, yeah, whether or not they're using video, like people can hear it, people can see it, and then we can do closed captions for people who can't hear. So actually, you know, Zoom, for all the security things you have to do on the back end and for how scary it can be at first, is really a highly accessible platform. Yeah, if Deborah Steves, do you want to unmute yourself or have one of us unmute you and you can talk for a minute about what you're doing?
Okay. At first I got a message that I wasn't allowed to unmute myself, so I think it took you doing that. So yeah, I don't know what was said while I wasn't in the class, but I am a big fan of Zoom. I hold about 4 different lectures a few times a month with various libraries in the United Way and our a Coatesville Center for Medical Health. I also hold a monthly VA clinic. Back in the day, I would go on site to the VA in Coatesville. And of course, now that has to be virtual. So to answer Dave Jonas, that mixture, when you set up your Zoom meeting, it's important to click the box that, yes, you want both phone and video opportunities. So because the veterans aren't able, although some of them have been given tablets, the VA has blocked Zoom accessibility to those tablets, so they actually have to use their phones. So it's important that our clients know that they can phone in as well as access through the computer. And so then I just keep them all in the wait room and bring them out, you know, one at a time to have, you know, a one-on-one session with them as if they're, you know, they're a client, as if we were sitting in the same room up at the VA, but we're either over the phone or on the computer. And I put up a a screen that all can see that kind of welcomes them to the VA clinic and explains that just like at the VA clinic, you had to wait your turn. It was first come, first serve, and everybody waited outside while the one client was being attended to. And so it's the same sort of format, which is nice, except, you know, they can wait on their sofa in the comfort of their room rather than, you know, come to a room at the VA and wait. So everybody gets put in the waiting room and they're notified of that, or I'll tell them that in the beginning, and then bring them out one at a time to get their information. And we can, you know, open up a file, we can start getting background. For those that need, you know, referrals, we can easily do that. So I find that very helpful. I have a intern that usually comes with me to the VA, so he's on the call as a co-host. And so sometimes as I'm grappling to say, you know, that's all you need to do is call this number. My intern Matt will, you know, quickly, since he's much younger than I am, he'll quickly Google that number while I'm talking and come up with it, and, you know, post it in the chat room, or tell the person, you know, here's who you can call. And so I think they're, you know, very appreciative of that sort of one-on-one contact, albeit virtually. With my classes, it's sort of the same thing. I'll present a class, and then then we'll have breakout rooms. And if people, you know, want to stay and have particular personal questions to ask, that's how we handle it through the breakout room. It's just, I think Zoom is a wonderful thing. We've started our monthly custody classes even on Zoom, and so the folks don't have to worry about finding a parking place in Westchester anymore. I think we'll probably continue that even long after the office is open, if we ever do reopen. It's just a wonderful tool.
Deb, can you just tell us briefly about the number of attendees you get at your outreaches?
So it ranges. Sometimes, you know, one of the outreaches is, of course, is expungements and clearing your criminal record. I might have sometimes 20 to 30 people at a class on that. My VA clinic is about the same as before we shut down. Sometimes there'll be, you know, 10 veterans waiting. Sometimes, you know, a little bit more, sometimes a little less. The UC lectures, you know, they range on, you know, 10 to 12 in a class. The class I gave today through United Way was about, you know, employment rights and how to make sure that everybody's doing everything safely, and how you can, you know, use that as not wanting to go back to work. So sometimes there's been about 10 people on that class. On today, there was only 2. It's, you know, it just depends.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you for speaking up. Do we have any more questions or comments? Also, can you guys all hear my my child jumping above my head right now? Because that's happening. Very much happening right now. Any more questions or comments?
I'll just add really briefly to what Deb was saying about the Zoom call-in feature. Zoom does this really amazing thing where it provides regional dial-in numbers, because I know for some people who have landlines, the cost varies based on what number you were calling. And to my knowledge, Zoom calls aren't free yet by the telephone. So you can always find like someone's local or regional number and get that out to them so that they don't necessarily have to pay a long distance charge. And I know not every landline even allows for that. So that is a great feature. We have a question from Christine Kirby. Hi, Christine. How did staff get past the fear of going live and using technology? I would say just go live with someone else and don't attempt to do it yourself, so that you can bounce off the other person, and like someone can be monitoring the technical issues while someone's presenting. And it also takes the stress off of having to know everything, because where I forget something, Caitlin will fill in and vice versa.
I'll say I'm pretty sure Kadeem was the first person at CLS to do one of these. I'm pretty sure. And, we definitely had some, rocky patches, not with him, but, with other people and the way that they conduct themselves. But I think a lot of people have seen how great Kadeem has done at these, honestly. I think he's done an amazing job, and he really led the way on CLS doing these. And I think a lot of other staff members have seen his success and have really, followed that. So, I mean, the thing I say with everything I do with communications and getting staff on board is you find one or two people who are willing to, be the first person and be the ambassadors, and then other people see how successful it is, and then they follow it. There's a question for Deb. Deb, I don't know if you can see the chat.
Yeah. And also to go to the fear of technology, I'm 67 years old, and the computers weren't even around when I was in school. I, learned to type the old-fashioned way, even before electric typewriters. So if I can, my point is, if I can do it, I think anybody can do it, frankly. Like I said, my only drawback is it is nice to have that second person online, so that because I'm a very slow typer sometimes, and they can Google and do things that I can't do in a quick manner. So yes, I've been doing the VA clinic, I would say, for about the past 8 years, maybe I think about 8 years, and before the pandemic, and we since it was mostly centralized at the Coatesville VA itself, my partner, the criminal program, they would send out all the flyers, and everybody just knew it was always the second Wednesday of every month. And so, but they would send out flyers to all the social workers, the doctors, to get the word out. And now the pandemic call-in is published on, I think Marion's in charge of that. She gets everything up on the social media, because I don't know how that operates.
Or maybe one more question or comment. Going once. All right, well, I just want to thank you all for attending this. I think you have the PowerPoint in the drive. My email address is on it. Kadeem's email address is on it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to one of us. Like I said, I'm pretty sure that my next session is October 8th at 10 a.m. It's definitely in the schedule app, so if you want to take a look at that. If you want to learn more about the different social media platforms, different communications platforms, everything that we talked about now, we're going to go a little more in depth about when you use each platform and how you use it. So if you're interested in that, check out the planned conference schedule and join us then.
Wonderful. Thank you so
Thanks
much,
a lot.
Caitlin and Kadeem, for being here. Thank you, Deb, for adding in. And everybody have a great rest of the day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thanks.